Hey, Macro Mob family. This is Damien. Welcome to another Macro Hit, and welcome to the Macro Mob. As usual, we are unqualified and uninterested in giving you financial, legal, or life advice, but unlike Sean, I might give you emotional support. Um, uh, on Thursday, President Biden announced the largest ever strategic petroleum reserve release. Right after he did that, oil prices dropped about 5% to around 107, $108 a barrel, and crude futures dropped about 7% to around $100 a barrel. But one thing a lot of people um, don't know is what the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is. Um, why do we have it? Where is it? How do we decide when to use it? And so Sean's going to give you some background on that today, and we'll have a little discussion about it. Take it away.
Yep. So the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, all the links, of course, will be in the description. This is from energy.gov. So one thing you have to understand about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, or the SPR, it's the world's largest supply of emergency crude oil. It's owned by the federal government, and it's administered by the U.S. Department of Energy. So it's federally owned oil stocks. They're stored in these huge, massive underground caverns. There's 60 of them, and they're located right here where you can see them, right here along the coastlines of Texas and Louisiana. So there's four of them. One, two, you have Bryan Mound, Big Hill, West Hackberry, and Bio Choctaw. So the history of this is that the reason that we started this was that in 1973, the Arab petroleum exporting countries imposed an oil embargo against the United States. So what this did is it created an energy crisis here in the United States. So in order to mitigate that going forward, in 1975, President Gerald Ford signed the Energy Policy and Conservation Act of 1975, and this went ahead and this established the SPR. So the mission of the SPR, the purpose is to protect the U.S. economy from severe petroleum supply interruptions through the acquisition, storage, distribution, and management of emergency petroleum stocks. So this could be used either way, right? So it's being used in a way right now that they're saying is because we have this supply constraints because of these conflicts that are going on overseas, that they can go ahead and tap into it. The other way that the president can choose that we need to tap into our SPRs is that, let's say we have too much of a glut. So the other way they could buy crude oil, barrels of oil from our oil companies and then store them in these large underground caverns. So the size of it, see, 60 salt cavern. Each cavern is cylindrical in shape with an average diameter of about 200 feet. And it's a height of over 2,550 feet. It says it's large enough for Chicago's Willis Tower to fit inside with room to spare. So these are huge storage facilities. And I wanted to show you all exactly how much we're actually storing at the moment and what it can fit. So it says it has these caverns for the SPR has a storage capacity up to 713.5 million barrels. As of March 31st, 2022, the SPR currently holds just under 570 million. So we actually hit that capacity. I believe that was in about 2009 where we got up to that large amount. And it says the amount of crude oil, if it was refined into motor gas, it would fill over 1.3 billion large sedans. So that's a huge amount of oil for us to store. So recently, as Dave was saying, you probably heard on the news that they were talking about that President Biden had decided to go ahead and release 1 million barrels of oil per day for 6 months. Now, I know when I heard that, I thought that was like something that was immediate. A couple things that you should know. Actually, whenever the president does decide to release any of our reserves from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, it takes a minimum of 13 days. It takes 13 days for them to even. I'm sure it's a logistical nightmare. People have to go into those caverns. They have to grab all that, right? Well, this most recent release, if you can see it right here. Here's on energy.gov. This is one of the news releases. So it'll release approximately 1 barrels of crude oil per day over the next 6 months. Crude oil in this emergency sale will enter the market in 2 releases. So it's actually not going to even begin to be released until May. So it's currently April. Since the first 90 million barrels were released between May and July through 2 notices of sale at totaling 70 million barrels and 20 million barrels already scheduled to be released in May 2022. So that means we already had 20 million barrels that were going to be released regardless. The remaining 90 million barrels will be released between August and October 2022. The Department of Energy must receive bids for the first notice of sale, and then it tells you, just kind of gives you the information. Now, if you remember that map that I showed you all that showed you those strategic locations for those caverns, it shows you right here what they're going to draw down. So 20.5 million barrels from Big Hill, 21.5 from West Hackberry, 18 million from Bryan Mound, and then 10 million from the Bayou Checkdown. So I thought this was interesting. We had the White House had already earlier to this was back in February. So this releases in January. So Biden had already chosen to, remember when fuel prices started escalating, he had decided to release this 13.4 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve Exchange to bolster full supply chain. And the way that this was done is in what is called an exchange. Okay. So this explains right here what SPR sales and what are exchanges. So the department may initiate a sale to respond to a severe energy supply interruption to prevent or address lesser supply shortages or to conduct evaluations of drawdowns. And so what that exactly means, what an exchange is, the U.S. can release and acquire the oil through a mechanism known as an exchange. In an exchange, an entity, so Chevron, ExxonMobil, okay, which are both actually part of this exchange, they borrow these barrels of oil for a short time period from the federally owned, the government-owned SPR, Strategic Petroleum Reserve, due to extreme circumstances. And then later on, they replace these barrels of oil along with some. So what happens is after we release this over a particular period of time, so we'll give ExxonMobil, I'm just going to make up a number. You can actually look at the actual sale that's going to go to Exxon and Chevron and all the individual companies. It's on this website. So let's say we give Chevron a million barrels of crude oil from this our strategic supply. They'll eventually replace that in those caverns, plus give us some that is extra. So I thought that was very interesting. So it's maybe not something that's necessarily to be as fearful as I've heard other people talk about, because I've never heard anybody say, hey, we actually get this supply back, which I thought was great.
Yeah, I guess it just depends what they're paying for it. And it also sounds suspiciously like how banks get money, except it's oil pump go. I don't know what sound an oil pump makes, but
I don't know. I'm not sure what it's real creaky. But actually, good point. I don't have this page up here, but the barrels of oil that we have in our strategic supply, the average price we paid for that oil was $29.
Yeah.
$29. So
Chevron could get it. Yeah, I mean, anything under the price of oil that they pay for it, they can, make a profit and in a way. And I suppose that's may be how it's intended to work, to let them purchase it at a discount, and that way they're giving us back some oil on top of that. But really, it's just a part of the share of the profit they made.
Yeah, it's just interesting, but just think what a boss move that is for our average barrels of crude oil is $29. Like, that's amazing. Yeah. I wanted to show people what the current oil price is, because I know everybody's been hearing that. You're hearing it at the tank. So we're currently sitting at $99.57 per barrel. When you go to the gas station, I read earlier that, and I read this on the EIA's website, which is the Energy Information Administration's website, that 63% of the price you pay at the tank is based on the current price of crude. So when you look at this, so we're sitting at 99. Now, if you all remember, we actually had a pretty big drop. And I wanted to show you this little chart of oil. So if you go first, let's look at where we were prior to really everything going on with the virus. You could say we were sitting right here around this $60 a barrel range. And then remember, we had that huge drastic drop where oil prices actually went negative. So if we look at, let's just say 70. Okay. So 70, that would be pre-pandemic. We had that huge drop in demand, everything panicked. This is when a lot of intelligent investors bought oil because it was just way too cheap. But if you look at the price now, we're at 100. So that's a 30% increase. Now, the reason I wanted to note that 30% increase is because on the EIA's website, which is the Energy Information Administration's website, they put out an article, a research analysis on March 16, 2022, where they're expecting these crude oil prices higher than $100 per barrel in the coming months. So I hear a lot in the news that people are saying, hey, oil prices are going to drop. You're going to meet that demand destruction. Well, here's the EIA right here saying that they think just because of the turmoil that we have going on around the world, that prices are going to stay elevated. So it's possible. I'm sure there will be a point where we get back to the prices that we had pre-pandemic, but we might be into the prices you're paying currently at the pump. So let's say, I think the national average right now is about $4.23 or $4.26. And then for diesel, I believe it's like $5.03 or $5.23. We might be expecting to pay these prices for, going forward for quite a while. So I just wanted to share that with people. I didn't know if you had any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think that's really an interesting point because the day after Biden announced his idea, the International Energy Agency, which is made up of a lot of European countries, 30 countries in that organization agreed that they also were going to start releasing additional barrels of oil, millions of barrels. Now, they did not publish, I think they were meeting in Paris, they did not publish the amounts. But so if you think about that, there's what's coming out of our reserve, there's what's going to come out of reserves from an additional 30 countries, and still the U.S. Energy Administration is considering that we may be stuck with oil at these prices for a while. So it may not change with supply. So it'll be interesting to monitor that.
Yeah, or who knows? They might put out a new report coming up next week, and where they go ahead and they take into consideration this release of these million barrels of oil per day, and they might shift their prediction. Because if you look at their prediction, because they're going to come out with a new prediction for April. If you look at their prediction for the month prior, which was February, they basically were saying that oil was going to be around $80 a barrel, which would be about, we could say it was about 10% higher than what it was, before everything kind of got locked down and we had that huge drop. So I'll keep people updated, because I will check it. I'll find out exactly when the report comes, because who knows, maybe that's a contrarian indicator. If they write a report and they believe that oil prices are going to drop precipitously and maybe it's going to fall back to 70 or something, that could be helpful for those who actively manage their accounts in the short term. Not that oil might not go with how the world is in the, depending on what your time frame is, right? You have a short time frame that could be a year. You have a midterm time frame that could be like 5 years. You have a long-term time frame. So I'll definitely be on the lookout for that, because if that information changes, not only would that be helpful for people who are having to spend all this money at the gas pump and all their other input costs, but that would bring a little bit more demand back for people to travel and stuff. So I'll keep up on it.
Yeah, and summer is we're quickly approaching summer, at least in the United States. That's our biggest driving time of the year, especially around July 4th, I think. So it'll be interesting to see where those gas prices are at that time.
It will be interesting. You'll either see me coming up here with that my portfolio is doing well, or it's doing really bad. So we just wanted to give you all a quick update, provide you all with some knowledge with that. We appreciate the love that we're currently getting at the channel. Any way that you can support us, however you choose to do that, that is your decision. We're not going to pander or tell you what to do, okay? We appreciate free, logical thinking people, and we hope that you just appreciate the content. Dame, did you want to leave them with anything?
I'm not sure if you mentioned, but I thought for people who were kind of interested in looking more into the oil reserve, the EIA puts out a weekly petroleum status report. So literally every week you can see how much oil is in the is in the mines, and they break it down. They've got lots of different reports, summaries. They have a calendar that shows you when things are going to be released. So you can go onto their calendar and monitor and say, hey, this is the day that the oil is going to be picked up by Chevron. So it's really a lot of information there that if you want to dig into this, and particularly if you're interested in oil and how it's moving into markets, is kind of a very well done website.
Yep. Well, we'll make sure to put all those links so that people can, do further research, or maybe even provide us with suggestions in the comments. I think there was an issue. I think maybe for some reason we had it set where the comments weren't being allowed to be displayed, but we'll also provide you all our email address. So if you guys have any thoughts, anything you want us to look into, we're curious people, so we'd love that. But we're out. We'll see y'all in the next video. Take care.